Hello and welcome. I'm Janvi Sen from The Wire, and with me today is a very special guest, Professor Abhijit Banerjee. He's a professor of economics at MIT and also founder and director of JPAL, the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So actually you're now celebrating 10 years of JPAL South Asia, and on that I wanted to ask you, in 2012 when you wrote Poor Economics, it was something of a phenomenon and had a lot of success, and since then your work with JPAL has also been in the limelight quite a bit. How would you say that has affected both policymakers and aid donors in India and otherwise?
Let me separate me from the story. I think that's JPAL has 180 affiliates. These are professors at different universities, and I think the work we do is the reason why it has some impact is because it's a sum total of a huge body of talent, and the part of that I have contributed to is tiny. So I think it's mostly, I would say, if there's one thing that JPAL has done successfully, is brought together lots of talent and lots of those people in fact work in South Asia. So there's a specific South Asian, the reason it's a specific South Asian success story, in the sense that we managed to attract really the top talent of the world to come and work here, and that I think is what first and foremost what JPAL South Asia has been able to do. Then if you continue, what have we achieved? Well, I think we now have a place at most tables, in the sense that people know what we do. They may decide that they want to talk to us either because they don't like what we say, or because we are just too much trouble for them, or it takes too long to do our cities, or they don't know what our cities are, but they know our name. So we exist as a kind of a player in the policy space in a sense in which we didn't exist 10 years ago. And right now I don't think we need. We probably it's not that everybody knows about us, but I think if you can find champions inside any government who will know what we do and why, if at all, we are valuable.
And in India you have a lot of projects running here. Would you have any examples of specific your RCT projects that have had a direct impact on some sort of policy changes?
Sure. One place where I feel that we've been working away, chipping away at a problem for many years. I think starting in maybe the late 90s, we've been kind of chipping at this problem of why kids who are in school don't learn. This is now well established. You've all seen the Asar report, which comes out and everybody shakes their head and then they forget about it. But we've been pushing that particular question for a long time. I think we are pretty confident that we know a significant part of the answer. In other words, the one very big part of the answer is simply the fact that when teachers teach children, they teach the syllabus and not what the child needs to learn. And at least in low grades, that's a huge problem, because if you don't have the basic skills, then it doesn't make any sense to be taught anything else. So if you can't read, then teaching you history is pointless. But many children in class 4, where they do teach social studies, can't read. So then it's pointless exercise to write things on the board which they try to copy down, but they can't write, so they can't copy down. So there's a certain amount of meaningless ritualization of the syllabus, which has been accepted as the standard thing to do. And I think when you don't do it, we have now probably 7 or 8 RCTs showing you immediately get large amounts of progress. And you can do that through various different models. So it's not that there's one way of doing it, but all of them share this idea that you better teach a child what he needs to learn or she needs to learn, rather than what the syllabus dictates he should be taught. So and that idea, I think that idea has had a fair amount of kind of eventual leverage, because I think you see now many governments prepared, like Karnataka is the latest one. I was in Karnataka about a month and a half ago talking to the government, and you feel that there is lots of interest in how to make the education system work better. And one idea there people are increasingly receptive to is that you somehow have to organize the classroom so that what children need to learn is given primacy. And you might think that's obvious, but it's actually not, for reasons I don't entirely understand. I must say, something to do with sociology of the education sector, but it's something that I think people are beginning to realize that it's so obvious it better be true.
Yeah. So a lot of your work is based on how what can be seen as relatively small interventions, or like you said, it may seem obvious, and how they could have big impacts that people have been for some reason ignoring. But one criticism has been that maybe that ignores political processes. What would you say to that, or the larger context?
Well, I'll say two things. One is, sure, I think that if I had a lever which made our democracy work perfectly tomorrow, I would, if I had a magic wand which makes it happen, I'm going to wave that wand. I have no, I just feel like people, it's an easy thing to say because you don't feel the obligation to actually deliver on it. But it's not clear to me that other than solving the problems we can solve, there's much else we can do. So it's great to talk about where we need to make our society more democratic or more egalitarian. All those things I completely agree with. But I don't feel that I see an immediate lever. Given right now the politics of the country, I don't see that there is I have one lever which says that tomorrow country becomes much more democratic and everybody will participate equally and we will get the service delivery that our the founders of the country intended. This would be great, but I don't see it. So that's one answer. The one answer is that it's I think it's
you do what you can.
We do what we can do. That's not necessarily, I don't mind people taking the opposite view, which I think is also useful, to say that no, all we do is protest. And protesting is valuable. I don't at all want to imply that just the act of taking the time out to protest is not valuable. It is valuable because it kind of creates a pressure to do something. But that's not me. I would rather spend my time trying to solve a problem that can be solved. I don't at all think that it's the only thing to do, but I do think that to say that this is useless until we transform society is kind of not helpful. Second point I wanted to make, which is we actually do work a lot on governance, and a lot of our work is on trying to, for example, if you inform voters, do you get better outcomes? And we do see some evidence of it. So it's not I don't want to say that democracy somehow is beyond our cities. It's not at all. It's a very kind of a natural place to try out different things. In some ways it's a place where the kind of there's lots of possibilities. People aren't certain of what the right way to move is, so it's a natural place to experiment. So I think of it as being very much within the domain of what we do, and indeed we do a lot of work on it. But that's not to say that I have a recipe for fixing democracy totally tomorrow.
On the topic of RCTs, if a researcher or a policymaker is looking at certain results that are from a particular context, how do you think he or she would be able to judge whether or not that could be extrapolated to a larger context or to a different setting? What do you think could help make that judgment?
So you put it perfectly. So eventually there is no way to avoid a judgment. I don't think that there is a sense in which we could say we did it here and here, and now we know it's true everywhere. That kind of claim at some level would be great to be able to make, but I don't think we can ever make. And I think that's mostly true for everything. It's not particularly true of RCTs. Any form of social science has that that's that problem, in the sense that any evidence we see comes from some place and it may not apply to some other place. Therefore, there's always some judgment. We try to do the best we can, which is try out things in multiple locations before we go to town with it. We try to also to vary the implementer. We try to go from implementation by an NGO to implementation by a government department. We try all the different forms of variation. Hopefully that's enough, but you're right that there is a point at which we say, well, we've tried enough and we can't wait forever. So it's fair enough. I think it's not. I think it's the nature of social science knowledge.
Just to move topics a little bit, in your columns recently you've been writing about the economic policies currently in place in India. So what would you say about the current government and their economic strategy, successes, failures? Have there been any major omissions?
So I would say mostly, for the most part, for most policies, what's striking is how little, maybe they're doing a lot, but certainly what shows up on the front page looks like UPA-III. There isn't really a deep policy thought that's different, and I think at the beginning there was a lot of talk about kind of freeing the people from the yoke of the government. I was not sure what that meant, but I now see that mostly that's not a big part of what's going on. Now, having said that, there's a couple of weird things that the government did. One is, I think, the demonetization, which I think was a kind of I don't think that there was any serious economics in it, and there was no particular reason why it would do much good. And my sense is that I think even though people in government won't say it, I don't think they are totally convinced that it was a great success either. I don't think anybody is saying, I think the government can't say it for some reason, but I don't think it was a.
But maybe the fact that they keep changing the
interpretation, the help points to that. So that's something that they did. And then I think the GST implementation was not great. I think they could have. I think the GST idea in the long run is a good idea, but I think the fact that I think the couple of political battles that needed to be fought to get it implemented well, and also kind of, I think it was worth missing the deadline to get all the processes along the way sort of sorted out. And I don't think they made the right judgment call. But there I feel a little bit less. It was kind of a judgment call. Maybe they got it wrong, but I don't think it was perverse. I think the GST idea, in the long run, I think most countries have gone to a GST. We have to think about how to deal with the informal sector. We haven't really fully got it. And but I think it's not going to be. But if we waited till the informal sector was all formalized, it would be a long time. So I think there had to be some imperfect movement, and so I don't want to be too harsh on the implementation. I think it annoyed a lot of people and was not clearly there was a lot of problems, but it's not that there's no perfect way from getting from where we are to the implementation of GST. So in that sense, I don't feel that there was I think it was something that could have been done better, but it wasn't an enormous disaster by any means.
In 2015, after the 14 Finance Commission recommendations were accepted by the centre and the state's share in the centre's taxes went up by 10%, there was a lot of talk also from the Prime Minister about how this would help states maybe shape their own development schemes and implement them better. Have you seen any impact of that on the ground?
No, to be honest, I haven't. But I mean, there was a little bit of a, smoke and mirrors there, because there's some, to some extent, that what happened was, so there were state entitlements under specific schemes which were also buried under that, under the extra money they were getting. So it was not easy for states to sort of say, okay, well, now we're going to default on some of our obligations. Well, the obligations are kind of set out. People kind of know that Indira Awas Yojana will give me a house or whatever, and now they are not, telling them, look, no, we change our mind, is politically difficult. So it was not, I mean, eventually it's possible that this will have consequences, because maybe eventually some of the new programs states will not agree to take up, and they'll develop their own. There are some state initiatives that are interesting. I mean, there's this Bhamasa program in Rajasthan, which is kind of novel. States are doing some new things. It's not huge yet.
And do you think that's an outcome of this change?
I don't know.
Okay.
My only point I was making is that we do want the states to become laboratories of different strategies, and that would be a good thing. Whether we are seeing, whether the funding has much to do with it, I don't know.
And talking about state strategies, recently all this talk about the Gujarat model thanks to the ongoing elections. So what is your take on the Gujarat model of development?
So I never understood what that exactly meant. I mean, other than I feel that Gujarat does have very good infrastructure. It's, I think, explicitly business friendly. So if I take that to define the Gujarat model, I think if you look at what, I mean, the results are actually, given that, not spectacular. So, you might think that, fine, Gujarat will be just much faster growing than the rest of the country. You don't see that. Now, there's two issues there which are, one is, I think, the big issue that scares me a bit is something that economists call convergence, which is that places that grew fast for a while inevitably slow down, because they're so, but if that's what's happening in Gujarat, Gujarat isn't that rich, so then we should be very worried. If you think, if the reason why Gujarat isn't, so I don't know whether Gujarat is not doing better. It's not one of the absolutely fastest growing states in the country. It's among the top, but not among, and it's hasn't shown a dramatic change. For example, since the BJP has taken over, the growth rate is pretty stable, going down slightly. So that path is not, I mean, I don't know that path could either be because the policies aren't doing anything, or because the policies are doing something, it's business friendly or whatever. But on the other hand, there is a general tendency towards slowing down, especially in the richer states. If that's the case, then that bodes very ill for the whole country, because if Gujarat at its level, this is sort of what's called the middle income trap, and I worry if the Gujarat represents our first step towards the middle income trap, where you get stuck at a relatively decent level of per capita GDP, but don't go towards the really well-off countries, and that's happened in a bunch of countries, and I worry that maybe we are slowing for that reason. So maybe the policies are doing something, at least in terms of attracting investment, but on the other side, they're not. But just the extra capital doesn't drive development. Now, why do I say that? I feel that one reason that might be the case, and that's sort of one very intuitive idea, is that Gujarat has not done a great job of investing in human capital. It's one of those states is a laggard in terms of investment in human capital. Now, that might eventually become a constraint on growth, because it's not, you're investing more and more infrastructure, capital, etc., but you don't have the corresponding improvement in human capital. And that's often the reason why countries get into the middle income trap. So it could be, I hope it's not true actually, but it could be that that's what's going on. And in which case, I think we as a country, we have done very badly in investing in human capital. We've been growing pretty fast despite that, but we kind of don't know why we are growing given how badly we've done on human capital. So it could be that basically, yes, you get to some point $5,000 PPP GDP per capita, $6,000, but then you stop growing. That's a concern we should be taking more seriously than we are now.
Just one last question. You've advocated before for shifting to cash transfers in India. So what do you think is the gain will be from that, and what kind of schemes do you think it should replace?
Well, I think that replace, let me get to two parts to the question. One is, I think that despite all the claims made for the PDS, it's an extremely costly scheme to run. It's got much better. I still don't believe that it's one of the most, I think the particular assumption of it, which is that people give you, if you give them food, they eat more. I don't think there's any evidence for it. And I just don't see it as being, there's no particular reason to take all the cost of maintaining the FCI, the procurement, every single step of the government infrastructure. I don't see a reason why to have it. So is it the case that, now you might say that there are places where food is really scarce and supply is bad, so I'm willing to be persuaded that there are places where you don't want to, we want to keep the PDS, but as the reason, but to take grains from Punjab and redistribute it in Punjab seems senseless to me. You might as well give people cash. It's not very different. I think there's plenty of evidence suggesting that in places where supplies are adequate, it makes no difference to nutrition. There's a bunch of RCTs looking at that. So then there's the question of what do you do about something like Narega. And there I think it's a more interesting question, because I think there you might say that in a sense what Narega was intended to do, it doesn't do, which is it's one thing it is not, it's not cash on demand. It's something that your village has to put up a set of proposals, then they get approved, then you get money. So something like 6 months after you need money, you get money. So one other problem we need to think about as a nation is how do we provide adequate emergency relief? Or when we talk about suicides and things like that, these are usually symptoms of a crisis, not of a long-term, also of a long-term problem, but especially of a crisis. And we don't have a crisis response system. We have, the best thing we have is Narega, but Narega is not a crisis response system. It's a very slow responding system. So we may want to think about a way to allow people, possibly based on self-selection, like Narega, which is where people get access to cash quickly when they really feel desperate. Rather, I think we haven't quite thought through that entire structure.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.